Chapter 25, Lessons and Leeway. At the beginning of his first private lesson with Professor Snape, Harry felt the need to clarify something. The next time you hex me, I'm going to get Fred and George to put up posters of you all over the school in the dress, with the vulture on your head. Snape's nostrils flared. I am not in the habit of hexing students, no matter the provocation, Mr. Potter. I trust you took my point. Harry didn't say, I've had nightmares every night this week about green light and laughter. He didn't say, sane people make points by talking, not by cursing each other. He didn't say a lot of things. You have my word that I will not hex you. Snape seemed like he was going to add something, but thought better of it. If you want to teach me to duel, I'll learn, Harry added. It seems like it'll turn out useful one way or another. Survive to be 15, and we'll talk. Harry grinned briefly. I've done all right so far. Arrogant as ever. Tell me, why do you want to learn potions? Harry blinked at his professor. I thought you knew. Despite what you may believe, you are not so very much the center of my world that I feel the need to know every thought that skitters through your mind. Which was Snape, for answer the question. Because it's beautiful, Harry said after a moment. Elegant, and different from duels and Quidditch. Those are all about where you are now, but potions you have to have a plan for, except when you need to improvise. He trailed off, not certain how to put it into words. You respect the art. Professor Snape did not turn to look at Harry or stop what he was doing, which was setting up a cauldron on one of the benches at the front of the classroom. You realize you have no talent for it. Harry waited, hoping it was a rhetorical question, but Snape seemed content to let the silence continue. I'm mostly good at Quidditch, but potions is what a Wanto do. Come watch, his teacher invited, and Harry pulled up a stool to watch his professor prepare a potion. Every movement was precise, every gesture spare, conserving every motion. It was not quite beautiful. Severus Snape was not someone who cared enough about how he looked for his actions to be beautiful, but his knife was a silver blur, and his expression was remote, and Harry wanted Tobin. You're sometimes exactly like your father, he said, laying out the ingredients, measuring them into shallow bowls. Harry stayed very quiet, because someone in a talkative mood about his father always had his attention. And sometimes you are nothing like either of your parents. He got into a great deal of trouble at school and caused a great deal of trouble. He was always laughing, and he was very good at Quidditch. Snape began crushing peppercorns in a mortar with controlled violence. Harry blinked wildly, worried he'd sneeze and interrupt the flow of words. Your mother, on the other hand, was good at everything. Everything she touched turned to gold. A flicker of a glance Harry's way, metaphorically speaking. Harry nodded. Neither of them turned their hand to subjects that they did not have a talent for. A flick of Snape's wand ignited the fire beneath the cauldron and set it to heating. Harry tried to draw his mind back to the present with very little success. I don't really know anything about them, Harry said. Aunt Petunia doesn't talk about Mum except to make up lies about her. The professor said nothing to this, adding his first ingredient with a flick of his fingers. Is this pepper-up potion? Harry asked to fill the silence. Indeed, the hospital wing will be needing it once the October rains begin. I usually put it together in larger batches. Why not this time? Because you are easily distracted. Harry glared, because that was definitely an insult. You said I could learn to make polyjuice. Polyjuice is restricted because it is easily used for deception, not because it is particularly difficult. The ingredients are rare and the process slow, but it isn't difficult if one has the necessary discipline. Harry thought guiltily about Aunt Marge and said nothing about his overall level of discipline. How did you steal the recipe from the restricted section? Snape asked, as if he was asking Harry to pass the potatoes. I asked Professor Lockhart for a pass. Snape snorted. And I'm supposed to believe you'll wait innocently playing with your friends while black stalks you. Well, I am, Harry said. I said I would, didn't I? And I'm not actually stupid. This didn't seem to merit a comment. Is there a potion for sleeping? Harry asked abruptly. My headache potion doesn't do much good if. Madame Pomfrey is supplied with dreamless sleep, Professor Snape said. It is, like calming draught and most other potions with beneficial effects, addictive over time. Your homework for next week will be a history of the development of the pepper-up potion and ideas for improvements to the recipe. Harry wilted. More homework. The look in Snape's eyes was far too cheerful, too. Professor Snape was, at heart, still a sadist. Bringing up where he could try some magical candy or ice cream recipes to Fred and George was at once a very good and very bad idea. Oh, you poor ignorant child. Fred, we have no choice. We have no choice, George. And with that, each of them took Harry by an arm and Frog marched him downstairs to introduce him to the Hogwarts kitchens. Harry's life was never the same again. Chapter 26, Educational Montage. Harry's first successful magical candy recipe was for little multicolored sugar darts that melted on your tongue and let you blow iridescent bubbles. He wouldn't have managed it at all, except he explained what he wanted to Fred and George, and they came back with a couple half-finished plans of their own. And somewhere in there, he got boiling sugar in his hair and had to go to the hospital wing, but Harry couldn't quite bring himself to care. The candies were banned from 3 classes within a day, after Harry passed them on to Fred and George to pass out to people to test. Professor Trelawney says I'm going to die, Harry commented to Professor Snape, during the 4th straight tutoring session where Professor Snape hadn't actually let him teach anything. Not that he minded sitting on his hands and watching magic happen, but not talking made him feel invisible, and that made him feel trapped. No, thank you. And you've begun seeing death omens everywhere. Well, yes. I avoid her, Snape said evenly. Whenever I remember she exists, I have a powerful urge to kill her. As Professor Snape seemed entirely serious, Harry decided to never, ever bring up his divination professor again. He didn't really want to be the one who tipped Professor Snape over the edge. And then he rearranged his name to say I am Lord Voldemort, and I stabbed the diary with a basilisk fang. I might have missed a few things during that last part. I was bleeding and Fox crying on me was pretty distracting. If you keep yourself out of the hospital wing this year, Potter, I will show you how to make fossilizing fog out of powdered basilisk eyes. You mean, Fromthat basilisk? Are you aware of another basilisk that has been killed recently? They are not common beasts. I didn't really want to kill her. There just wasn't time. Save your sympathy, if you will. Slytherin didn't really get lucky having Voldemort as their heir, did they? You picked up the persistent habit of naming the Dark Lord from the headmaster, didn't you? He said it was a good idea, that we shouldn't be frightened of a name. Fear is a healthy trait. It shows you are paying attention. Harry didn't really have anything to say to that, but thankfully, his teacher didn't expect him to. Harry looked curiously at the goblet. Lupin smiled. Professor Snape has very kindly concocted a potion for me, he said. I have never been much of a potion brewer, and this one is particularly complex. He picked up the goblet and sniffed it. Pity sugar makes it useless, he added, taking a sip and shuddering. Why? Harry began. Lupin looked at him and answered the unfinished question. "You've been feeling a bit off color," he said. "This potion is the only thing that helps. I am very lucky to be working alongside Professor Snape. There aren't many wizards who are up to making it." Professor Lupin took another sip, and Harry had a crazy urge to knock the goblet out of his hands. "He's brilliant at potions," Harry said cautiously, not sure how to put, "and has murder in his eyes every time he looks at you." Luckily or unluckily for Harry, Professor Lupin smoothed over the awkwardness as if it had never existed, and Harry was left wondering if he should warn Professor Lupin or beg Professor Snape for the recipe. Are you poisoning Professor Lupin? Snape's lip curled. If only, Potter, if only. This was not particularly reassuring. Harry hesitated, then ploughed on. I heard you talking to Professor Dumbledore on Halloween about how you thought someone inside the castle was helping Black. Snape took a pinch of blue powder and flicked it into the potion he was working on, turning it a delicate lavender. One of the maddening things about watching him work was that it was readily apparent that while he expected her to stick to the recipe, he wouldn't know a recipe if it bit him. If it said to dice, he crushed. If it said measure 2 tablespoons precisely, he threw in a handful. If it said stir for 5 minutes, he stirred for 5 repetitions of an obnoxious song instead. It was hateful. You told me about. But, Professor, he helped Voldemort killed. He will die, Professor Snape, in a tone that came eerily close to gentle, and it will be a painful, horrible death. Be content with that. Getting to know Professor Snape this year was really not comforting at all. Chapter 27. An Evening with Dumbledore. Those lessons Professor Snape's been giving you, has he said anything at them about Professor Lupin? Ron asked, after Snape's disastrous turn as their defense against the dark arts teacher. Harry frowned. Not really. He mostly has me watching him work while he talks about discipline. Sounds mental. He's the only potions professor we have, Harry said, a little defensively. I know, mate, but I worry about you. He's had it in for you since first year, and now he agrees to teach you. It doesn't add up. It's not like he's being any nicer. Bedpans. Harry clapped Ron on the shoulder and changed the subject to Quidditch, determined to cheer his friend up, and added werewolves to a short mental list entitled Severus Snape Wants to Murder. The first Quidditch game of the season ended with Harry in the hospital wing and his broomstick in shattered pieces. His broomstick and his first Quidditch loss were at the top of his mind, but he had so much free time to brood that he fit in a few minutes to think about what Professor Snape would say. If you keep yourself out of the hospital wing this year, Potter, I will show you how to make fossilizing fog out of powdered basilisk eyes. No, knowing Professor Snape, he wouldn't even have to say anything, just look at Harry. Harry had almost managed to fall asleep Saturday night when the curtain around his bed rustled. His visitor didn't say a word. Harry froze with the unsettling certainty that it was Sirius Black come to murder him. If he went for his wand, would he be in time? He held very, very still. Ah, Severus, came the headmaster's welcome voice. Here you are. Headmaster, Snape said stiffly. Standing guard. I was checking the potions stock here to see what needed replacement. Not checking on Harry. Don't be ridiculous. You could be a little less hard on the boy, Severus. He looks up to you. You should find that as disturbing as I do, headmaster. There is wisdom in leaving the past in the past. Not that, never that. He isn't his father, Severus. That is not the problem. Surely you must see why this is twisted. I see a young boy who respects you. Then you will cease mentoring him. I never started. Severus. Harry tried very hard not to breathe. Very well, Dumbledore said, in a very gentle tone. We won't speak of it again. Thank you, headmaster, Snape gritted out, and Harry heard the curtain rustle again. Harry, Dumbledore said, and Harry opened his eyes, wincing against the dim light and that gentle, inexorable look in Dumbledore's twinkling eyes. He didn't know why Dumbledore hadn't just twinkled Voldemort to death. It absolutely would have worked. I must ask you to be patient with him, Dumbledore continued. We each have our own path to walk, but Severus has never had an easy one, rather like you yourself. Harry would really like to know what Dumbledore knew about Harry's path. Sometimes the fact that Dumbledore knew everything was less comforting than other times. Dumbledore sighed. Or you could develop an interest in knitting, he suggested more lightly. It's very peaceful work. Harry laughed softly. Good night, my boy. Rest well. Chapter 28. Tiny Little White Kitten. It was nearly December, and Goyle loomed abruptly out of the shadows of the stairwell. Harry peered up at him through his hair. Apparently being tall wasn't enough to intimidate Harry anymore. He pulled out his wand and waited for Goyle to talk. You never told anyone I tried to smash your head in those times. Why? Harry thought back to his first year and its frantic pace. It never occurred to me that anyone would help. Probably wouldn't be a strong answer. Well, you were just trying to protect Draco, right? Harry tried cautiously. Because he's your friend. Right, Goyle grunted. He says it's his job to protect you, you know. Harry had been curious about that for a while. He's tiny, little tiny white kitten. Goyle sounded puzzled, but that wasn't unusual. Almost anything was enough to puzzle Goyle. I don't think he'd like you saying, that. Tinny kitten. We protect each other. That's what friends do, isn't it? Goyle sounded doubtful. That's what friends do, Harry agreed, trying to pass Greg Goyle and mutual loyalty in the same thought. It didn't really work, but he kept his expression clear. Why bring it up now? Talking about Black in Azkaban. Wanted to know if I owed you. Because you could have been expelled or sent to prison for attempted murder, and you weren't, Harry hazarded. Talking to Goyle was incredibly exhausting. Harry did not know how Draco did it. We were kids, how about just? What the hell was he supposed to say to this? He didn't want Goyle owing him anything. It was creepy. We're even, okay, don't worry about it. Goyle considered this, and Harry concentrated on looking calm and collected. Next time I hex you, I'll miss, Goyle said, with a nod, and ambled off down the stairs. Slytherins were so disturbing. Harry had dropped by Professor McGonagall's office to see if she was in. He half-heartedly wanted to tell her about the Grim, and mostly wanted an excuse not to, when he heard Draco's voice. Harry had never yet resisted a prime opportunity to eavesdrop. I have had a letter from your father, Mr. Malfoy. I understand congratulations are in order. Thank you, Professor McGonagall, Draco said stiffly. Of course, I would have absolutely forbidden a student at your level from attempting, but I would have, apparently, been wrong. You must be very proud. You haven't told anyone, have you? Well, no, certainly not. A minute's silence. I see, Mr. Malfoy. I understand entirely, and these things do change with time. My lips are sealed. Draco stalked out of her office, met Harry's eyes in a furious glare and hissed, "This is your fault." Harry watched him go in absolute confusion, and just as Draco turned the corner at the end of the hall, was equally surprised to hear his usually prim and proper professor fall into giggles. What had Draco done? Harry was feeling detached enough at the next potions class to let it all wash over him. Draco's taunts, Snape's sarcasm, the endless interplay. They're showing off for each other, he thought in a sudden burst of icy clarity. Neither of them are this awful on this own, but put them both in a room with me, and it's like it's a competition for who can be nastiest to Harry. It put him in a bad enough mood during that evening's tutoring session, one of two he had each week, that he said, "If I don't do something at one of these evenings, I'm going to go mad." I'm so glad you volunteered, Potter. End-of-term essays need to be checked. You may work on the first and second years. After that, Harry was a lot quicker to join Ron's chorus of Slytherins. They are the worst. Chapter 29. Cat, Dog, Hippogriff. Harry couldn't go looking for Sirius Black, but he hadn't promised anything about Sirius Black coming to him. That was, if not his reason, perhaps his excuse for taking a walk near the castle's foot, enjoying the crisp snow on the ground and ignoring the voices in his head that sounded like Hermione and Ron and the professors. Those voices were better than remembering his mother's voice, begging. Almost anything was. A shadow on the snow made him jump, something coming out of the shadows of the forest, moving low and dark and fast over the snow, and the sound of barking. Yes, a dog barking. Harry watched in bemusement as he watched a dark, shaggy dog sprinting flat out as if hell was on its tail. Eyes that were used to catching glints of gold across a whole Quidditch pitch finally brought what he was seeing into focus. A shaggy black dog was chasing a tiny white shape, a cat. No, a kitten. A tiny white kitten. His ears were flat back, and his eyes were wild, and his white fur was puffed up so Harry couldn't see where cat ended and snow began. Desperately trying to remember a spell for dealing with animals, and reassuring himself that at least werewolves looked nothing like dogs, Harry bolted on an intercept course, even if it probably was Malfoy. The kitten saw Harry and changed trajectory, scrambling up Harry's robes with an ear-splitting yowl and spitting at the dog from Harry's shoulder. The dog looked into Harry's face, pinned his ears back, and whined piteously. Harry resisted the urge to rub his forehead, to push aside the impending headache. "Easy, boy," he said to the dog. "You don't want to eat him. He'd taste awful." The cat swatted at his ear, with claws. "I mean, he's very elegant. Noble animals, cats." The dog snorted doubtfully, flopping down in the snow in apparent despair and covering his nose with his paws. Harry squatted down gingerly and held out a hand. "I'm sorry, boy. I'm sorry I thought you were a grim, too." This did not appear to make the dog feel any better. "You look terrible." Again, no improvement. Harry wasn't sure what he was expecting. Draco appeared content to sit on his shoulder and pretend to be an actual cat. Unless it was an actual cat, and Harry was going mad. He'd end up freezing to death if he tried to figure this out here, and then Sirius Black wouldn't even have to murder him. "Come on, you two," Harry said, with a lightning-fast lunge to grab the dog's ruff. "I know the way to the Hogwarts kitchens, and you're both too thin." The cat hissed at him softly, but didn't scratch him again, which Harry took as the only win he could get. "If you bite me, I'm not talking them into giving you any ham pie," Harry informed the dog, on the theory that wizarding animals were often quite weird. It seemed to work, at least enough for the dog to scarf a whole pie and fall asleep by the fire. The cat had a bowl of milk and then planted himself firmly in Harry's lap, pinning Harry there. "You're going to make me late to Quidditch practice," Harry informed the kitten, which had dried out into an absolute little puffball. He was certainly going to be an elegant cat eventually, but right now all his legs were too long, and he looked like nothing so much as a fur collar. The cat flicked a white ear in apparent complete acceptance of Harry being late to Quidditch practice, as the house elves bustled around them, delighted to have people to serve. "You know," Harry said, very aware that Draco had claws now, "you remind me of one of my classmates. His name's Draco. Sometimes we get along and sometimes we don't. He'd be fine with me being late for Quidditch practice, too." The tip of the kitten's tail twitched. Harry resisted the urge to think it was cute. It was a good shape for Draco, he thought. Small, cute, and absolutely evil. "But Dracanos, I have really good blackmail on him," Harry continued quietly, so as not to wake the dog. "So he wouldn't try to make a fuss about it, especially since I saved him from being eaten by a dog 10 times bigger than he is." With incredible dignity, the cat got up and jumped down to land squarely on the dog, which startled awake with a savage growl. "You are so terrible with animals," Harry hissed at Draco, tired and furious. The cat refused to look at him, but one ear flicked. So he wasn't being ignored, was he? Draco was a lot easier to like as a cat, Harry thought ruefully. Evil little beast. "Next time I'm letting him eat you," Harry said severely, and with that he went to Quidditch practice. Served Draco right. Harry's second attempt at luring Sirius Black into trying to murder him, sneaking out to Hogsmeade weekend, led to nothing except a lot more detail about the murderer who betrayed his parents. On the one hand, it was nice to be able to share it with Hermione and Ron, but on the other, he really didn't want to talk about it. He didn't know what he wanted to do about Sirius Black, and extra time to try to decide hadn't brought him anything but more nightmares. And Hermione and Ron meant well. but neither of them felt it the same way. Even if he never talked to Professor Snape about it again, he wouldn't forget the feverish light in his eyes as explained about Sirius Black. Going to visit Hagrid wasn't an attempt to lure Sirius Black out of hiding, but it did give Harry an idea how he wanted to use his blackmail with Draco. Draco had other ideas. "It isn't as if you have any proof, Potter," he said, sticking his nose in the air. "Professor McGonagall said at the beginning of term that there's a registry animagi have to be on," Harry said helpfully. "A public one. I bet it'd be pretty easy for me to get a copy. The ministry likes me this year." "It is your fault, you know," Draco said, after a sullen silence. "You and your talk about me being a dragon animagus." Since Harry wanted Draco's help, he kept a straight face. "Look, all you have to do is say Buckbeak's not that bad. It was a mistake. You were mucking about." "Oh, yes, and how would that look to the panel?" "It'd be fine. My uncle lets my cousin Dudley get away with way worse than insulting a hippogriff. I'm sure your father would understand." "You did not just compare me father to your horrible muggle uncle." "That's not what I meant, and you know it. His uncle Vernon didn't try to murder children, for one thing." Harry tried to make his face look diplomatic. "My father," Draco plowed on, "loves me. Everything he does is to better our family and preserve our greatness. What does your uncle do for you? I know he doesn't want you. Any idiot could see that." Draco perked up and asked with cheerful curiosity, "Does he hit you?" Harry stared at him. "He does, doesn't he? You really should give over about muggles. They're really awful. I've only met a few, of course, but father's told me all about them, and I've read the histories." "Not every muggle is like my uncle," Harry said, fighting the urge to rush to Uncle Vernon's defense. "He's never managed to hit me because I dodge was not a ringing endorsement of muggle kind, really." "Well, it's the ones that are like your uncle that I want to keep an eye on." "You mean murder?" "That's a compromise, isn't it? Just dealing with the bad ones." Harry kept his eyes on Draco as he fumbled in his bag, pulled out his headache potion, and downed a whole jar of it. It didn't really help. Draco Malfoy being the person to notice there was something really wrong with the Dursleys was going to stick in Harry's mind for a long time. Which, actually. Draco watched him curiously, giving the impression of a cat at rest at a mouse hole. "It's not as if you even like fighting," Harry said, because he was trying to visualize Draco Malfoy murdering people and not think about the Dursleys. "Did you just call me awkward, Potter?" "Diplomacy, blast it." "That's not what I meant, and you know it. Just, wouldn't you rather arrange for two of your enemies to stab each other in an alley somewhere while you were having a nice cup of tea across town?" "I suppose it would cut down on bloodstains," Draco said more cheerfully. "They're hell to get out of robes," Harry agreed, relieved. The trick to having a civil conversation with Draco Malfoy, he thought, was to assume Draco had only a passing relationship with the reality everyone else lived in. The reality Draco lived in meant people relaxed while talking about blood and were offended if someone suggested they weren't a natural-born murderer. Why wanted to have a civil conversation with Draco was still a good question, but Harry thought it had something to do with the way Draco was continually, endlessly unimpressed by him. It was a nice change from Colin and even Ron, who tended to accept Harry's place as the boy who lived as Harry's do. At least, it was a nice change in small doses. Harry wouldn't actually want to talk to Malfoy for more than a couple minutes every few months. He might accidentally suggest Draco wouldn't murder a toddler with his own two hands or something horrible like that. "I'll think about my testimony at the Beast's trial," Draco said. "Don't get your hopes up." Harry nodded and escaped the conversation before Draco could realize that more than anything in the world, Harry didn't want Draco thinking too long about Harry's muggle relatives. Chapter 30. Lupin and Snape are painfully civil. "Professor Lupin," he said, "if you knew my dad, you must have known Sirius Black as well." Lupin turned very quickly. "What gives you that idea?" he said sharply. Nothing, I mean. I just knew they were friends at Hogwarts, too. Lupin's face relaxed. Yes, I knew him, he said shortly. Or I thought I did. You better be off, Harry. It's getting late. The dog was back in the kitchens during the first week of term when Harry snuck down between classes to ask the house elves if he could have a snack. It had been washed at some point in the past few weeks and was gnawing enthusiastically on a turkey carcass. Harry settled down next to him to eat his cauldron cake. They think you're my dog, Harry confided. I'm not going to tell them you're not. They'd kick you out and it's snowing again, but I really don't have time for a dog. I've got extra lessons with Snape and Lupin, and I think they're going to break down and try to kill each other any day now. The dog paused its gnawing to give him a doggish look. You don't know who any of these people are. That's all right. Then there's Ron and Hermione, who aren't talking, and Neville, who's going to have a nervous breakdown over potions, and everyone thinks my new firebolt's evil. That was probably more than a dog needed to know. You're a good listener, Grim, Harry informed him. I bet I could find someone who could give you a home somewhere in the castle, not Draco, though he was the cat you met. I bet he taunted you, he's like that. He's done his best to get a hippogriff killed this year because I'm really not sure why Draco Malfoy does anything. If I had a mum and dad at home that loved me, I'd spend less time acting like a miserable git. Harry finished his thought to himself. It's good they're feeding you. Harry got a wet nose in his face and hugged the dog awkwardly. Stop it, he sputtered. Dog breath. The dog huffed at him, and Harry sighed and heaved himself to his feet. Back to work. Did you know Professor Lupin at school, too? Harry asked Professor Snape, while his teacher inspected Harry's diced acorns. He figured it was good timing, since Professor Snape already had something to criticize. At Snape's look, Harry realized he'd misjudged the situation badly, but it was too late to back out. Professor Lupin is your teacher, and you will offer him the proper respect. I respect him loads. He's been teaching me the Patronus, Harry said, taking the change of subject and running with it. You failed to mention this. It's not as if I tell you all about my day, Harry said, crushing beetles. He'd picked up the habit from Professor Snape of imagining that whatever he was crushing today was his current problems. Crush goes people who suspect an innocent broomstick. Crush go Dementors. I was not suggesting gossip. Reporting unusual behavior would be appreciated. He's unusually competent for a defense professor, if that's what you mean. There was a faint snort, and Harry turned to look at Professor Snape, whose expression was completely smooth. That couldn't have been real, could it? Harry had to be hearing things. Well, unusual behavior. Did you know Draco's an animagus? As his head of house, it's my responsibility to monitor the situation. I am, however, curious how you became aware of it. I was not aware you and Mr. Malfoy were on familiar terms. Avoiding the question neatly, Harry replied, He's been picking fights with housebits. He used me as a decoy when one of them bit back. Harry studied Snape's expression, which he found unusually impossible to read, but didn't let it throw off his timing on adding the beetles to his potion. Professor, imagine, if you will, Lucius Malfoy's expression, if informed that his precious heir was picking fights with housebits, Potter. Harry imagined, and then he started to laugh. You will not repeat that, Snape added. I may not enjoy my job, but I intend to keep it. Why are you even a teacher, if you hate kids so much? Because the headmaster has a soft spot for lost causes, Snape replied in clipped tones. Hagrid, Binns, Filch, Trelawney, Lupin, do you think that they were hired because they were the best and brightest of their field? I assure you it is not the case. But you're great at potions, aren't you? There is more to being a teacher than being a potions master. Harry couldn't actually disagree with that, at all. I am very well aware of who and what I am. Headmaster Dumbledore is simply an eternal optimist. I admire that, even if I cannot replicate it. Harry considered and discarded. You could try being a better teacher, you know, as something likely to get him hexed, or at least exiled from extra potions lessons. Uncertain what to do with this side of his teacher, he settled for returning to dicing his unicorn hair and making sure his flame kept burning purple. Chapter 31. Harry and Hermione. The news of the week, Potter. Professor McGonagall still won't return my firebolt. I don't suppose you could know, sorry, forget I asked. Miraculous, he learns. Harry ignored this sarcasm as beneath him. And how are your little friends? Ron and Hermione aren't talking to each other because her cat keeps trying to eat his rat, Harry said, gingerly adding his catfish whiskers to the potion. And Hermione's not talking to me because I sided with Ron a little and we both have too much homework. It was my understanding that Miss Granger assisted you with your homework. I don't know. I've been too busy trying to figure out the reading about undetectable poisons to figure out Hermione. Professor Snape considered this statement with apparent calm, and then vanished the potion they'd been working on for more than an hour. Professor, it does me no good to attempt to impart the most fundamental skills of potion making if you fail your third-year classes because you do not understand the basic curriculum. Snape stalked away. Clean that up. Getting cross with me isn't going to help, Harry said amiably. It just makes you look like you need a blood pressure potion. Harry was furious as well, but he had different ways of coping with his anger. What, Professor Snape said with icy clarity, is your problem with undetectable poisons? The textbook, Harry said immediately. The explanations you give in class are all right, but it just takes me a long time when I can't ask Hermione to explain the diagrams and things, and she sniffs at me if I ask her for advice these days. I suppose I assumed. Were you educated in basic comprehension and arithmetic before Hogwarts, Potter? I was never much good at maths, he said doubtfully. Throwing you into an arithmancy class at this point would undoubtedly be funny, but it probably wouldn't be effective, Snape said half to himself. Harry hated Snape's sense of humor. Very well. Throw yourself on your friend's mercy. Beg her forgiveness. Agree with her that her cat is a paragon among cats. Tell her that teaching others is a good way to learn material, whatever you have to do to regain your place in her good graces. It's that way you made me grade all those papers. I dreamed I was bleeding green ink all over the Chamber of Secrets. Do not use your nightmares to change the subject. I'm not lying to Hermione for you. Were any of the things I just said a lie? Well, her cat's awful. All cats are awful. Next. She told Professor McGonagall my broom was probably from Sirius Black and out to kill me. It's a firebolt. Ah, Quidditch. The sport more important than a girl who has faced down the Dark Lord with you, undoubtedly. It's not about that. Then what is it about? Harry hesitated because he wasn't quite sure. Harry, admirable and sensible though I find your lack of trust in anyone resembling authority, you must understand something in order to interact with most people. Most people trust authority and obey rules. You are the outlier, not Hermione Granger. Harry shifted uncomfortably. Do you miss your friend? Harry nodded. Then say that you forgive her, because that is what friends do, even if you may never understand her reasons. You're just trying to manipulate me into getting her help with homework. Snape looked rather blank. I don't have enough stuff to want people taking it, Harry added. Do as you're told, Potter. Since arguing would get them nowhere fast, except giving Professor Snape more material, Harry dug in his bag for his half-completed S on undetectable poisons. I made you thinking mints as an apology, Harry began. His apology speech, which ended up rushed, incoherent, and rather angry, went on for a few minutes, before Hermione tucked her hair behind one ear and asked, What are thinking mints? They're peppermints with concentration potion in them. Professor Snape says they won't poison anyone and are an abomination against the art. But he also said that, since they're almost useless as a way to take concentration potion, you can have as many as you want, and they will help you study. I'm almost certain. And even if they don't, they'll still taste good. Hermione tried a mint. Hermione burst into tears. Harry patted her on the back, feeling incredibly awkward. Awful boys, Professor Vector, Crookshanks, were the only words Harry could make out through her storm of emotion. None of them really helped him figure out what to do. He shot a frantic look across the common room at Ron, who hadn't thought this was a good idea in the first place. No help there. But look, at least no one's trying to kill you, right? Harry hazarded. That's good, isn't it? I care if someone wants to kill you, Hermione said, and threw a book at him. Harry ducked, and Hermione spent the next minute fussing over her book, which was undamaged by its use in the gender wars. A short while later, they were both sitting by the fire, tired and out of sorts and no closer to peace. Professor Snape told me to ask you for help, but it seems more like I should be asking if I can help. I'm really enjoying all my classes, Hermione said lowly. But how? That's not the point. You don't like divination. I'm sure there's something to it. I'm going to learn everything there is to know, Harry. Professor Snape's going to get me one of those math and reading books with the big letters and primary colors because I admitted the textbook's hard. It's hard for everyone but you, isn't it? Everyone does seem to have a great many questions about it, but it's a very traditional book. It's been in use at Hogwarts since the 19th century. No wonder Professor Snape never uses the recipes when he's making his own potions, Harry commented, distracted. He's a big believer in using all the most modern innovations in potion making. I bet it drives him batty. Professor Snape doesn't use the recipes, Hermione asked, sounding betrayed. He just throws things into the cauldron, Harry confirmed, slumping in his comfy armchair and staring at the fire. Then I ask how much he used, and he says a handful like that's a real measurement. I hate him so much. You know, Harry, I thought if you actually started getting lessons with him about potions, you get along better, but it doesn't seem like it. He's brilliant, corking mad, but brilliant. When he's in a good mood, which is really almost never, you can tell he's in a good mood because he'll talk about the ways poisons used to be used to torture people and how he'd really like to murder more people than he's allowed to murder. Harry glanced at Hermione to find her staring at him in open-mouthed horror. It's not like, I asked him if he was poisoning Professor Lupin, and he said if only. Things like that. Well, of course he's not poisoning Professor Lupin, Hermione said, startled. That would be impossible without. He gives Professor Lupin an awful-looking potion every month, Harry told her. It looks absolutely caustic, and he won't tell me what it is. It must be wolfsbane, Hermione said absently. That would make sense, Professor Lupin is a werewolf, Harry hissed. Hermione looked guilty and grabbed his hand. Oh, you can't tell anyone. You mustn't. You know what Ron's like about werewolves. Does Dumbledore know? Harry said, starting up from his seat. Of course. I've known ever since Professor Snape explained. I'm sure all the teachers know. It's not our business, Harry. Harry sat down again, hesitant. I thought werewolves were a little, dangerous. 8 people. They're terribly discriminated against. I looked it up. It's like Buckbeak. They're considered dangerous magical creatures. The bottom dropped out of Harry's stomach as he imagined Professor Lupin on trial, with the same precedents to draw on that Buckbeak had. And the wolfsbane potion means he won't hurt anyone. Say you won't tell anyone, Harry, please. All right, Harry said numbly. I won't. So did Professor Snape want to kill werewolves because of Professor Lupin, or want to kill Professor Lupin because of werewolves? It made it hard to keep a mental list of things Professor Snape wanted to kill straight. It really did. Harry and Hermione got along better after that. even though they still didn't have time to breathe in a welter of schoolwork. And then there was the next Quidditch match. Chapter 32, Snape and the Marauders. Making up with Hermione wasn't as simple as one conversation, especially with Scabbers missing, but it made Harry feel a little better about the whole mess. Watching the whole school laugh at Draco for a change, after Harry won, the match for Gryffindor was really lovely, though it was rather ruined by Sirius Black turning up in Harry's bedroom when Harry was too far asleep to fight him. Harry settled for making a mental note to talk to Draco about how, while he appreciated Draco not being more of a Burke than he absolutely had to be, he still needed Draco to understand that being normal levels of awful was going to get himself a Patronus to the face. On second thought, Draco probably learned that already. Back to black. "What are those spells you cast at the beginning of every afternoon?" Harry asked, watching Snape's practiced wand movements and sharp, quiet words. "Wards against eavesdropping and entry, and one to alert me if anyone tries anything. I didn't live through the last war by being careless." Harry put his bag down and glanced up at his teacher. "Which side of the war were you on, sir?" "Don't ask questions you don't want to know the answers to, boy." Harry tried to decide if he should go for his wand. "I believe I have made myself clear about which side of the coming war I will be on," Snape said very softly. "To the people in this room. It will remain unclear to people outside this room. Do you understand me?" "No, not really, sir." "Good, then we may begin the lesson." It was a subdued review of potions history, and Harry found it hard to keep his mind on the task at hand. At the end of the lesson, Snape asked, "Do you trust me, Harry Potter?" "Not for all the world, sir." "Then there may yet be hope. You may go." Harry hesitated. "Yes, I do have things to do besides coddle you, child." "Do you hate Professor Lupin because he's a werewolf, or do you hate werewolves because of Professor Lupin?" Harry asked hurriedly. It had been bothering him, and he couldn't bring himself to ask Professor Lupin about it, when Professor Lupin was kind to him and always looked very tired. That got an actual smile from Professor Snape. "An interesting philosophical question. Now, Granger, I shall have to consider the answer to that one carefully." "How do you think Black's getting into the castle?" Harry asked, because letting Snape brood about his hatred of his fellow professor seemed like a way for this year's defense appointment to end in murder, and/or sacking for attempted murder. "Haven't we covered that?" Snape asked. It took Harry a minute. "Professor Lupin wouldn't do that." "You do not know Remus Lupin." "Good night, sir," Harry said doubtfully. He'd be late to Quidditch practice if he didn't get on with things, so he left it there. Sneaking out to Hogsmeade right under Snape's nose did not make Harry feel particularly good about himself as a student. But on the other hand, if he waited to have fun until no one was trying to kill him, he'd be dead and still not having any fun. Harry, feeling hot from their climb, was just considering taking off the cloak for a few minutes when they heard voices nearby. Someone was climbing toward the house from the other side of the hill. Moments later, Malfoy had appeared, followed closely by Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy was speaking. "Should have an owl from father any time now. He had to go to the hearing to tell them about my arm, about how I couldn't use it for 3 months. Crabbe and Goyle sniggered. "I asked father if it might be useful to show mercy as a gesture, but he said it made the headmaster look weak to be unable to save a giant bird." "Mercy's bad," grunted Crabbe. "Well, I know that," snapped Malfoy, rolling his eyes. "Obviously, I just meant theperancy off mercy." "I think the cat thing's done something to your brain," Crabbe added. Draco bared his teeth in a snarl. "Say that again," he hissed. "Sorry, Draco," Crabbe said, hanging his head. "You're forgiven," Malfoy sniffed. Malfoy suddenly caught sight of Ron, his pale face split in a malevolent grin. "What are you doing, Weasley?" Malfoy looked up at the crumbling house behind Ron. "Suppose you'd love to live here, wouldn't you, Weasley? Dreaming about having your own bedroom." I heard your family all sleep in one room. Is that true? Harry seized the back of Ron's robes to stop him from leaping on Malfoy. Leave him to me, he hissed in Ron's ear. If this is how Crabbe is about your kitten problem, he whispered invisibly in Draco's ear, imagine what Ron will do with it. Draco huffed. Out of our way, Weasley. You're not worth our time. Draco stalked away, every inch of his body language furious. Harry had a bad feeling about this somehow. What do you do? Ron asked curiously. Threatened him. He won't like that. He'll tell Professor Snape right off. Oh, blast it. Harry broke into a run. Back into Honeydukes, back down the cellar steps, across the stone floor, through the trapdoor. Harry pulled off the cloak, tucked it under his arm, and ran, flat out, along the passage. Malfoy would get back first. How long would it take him to find a teacher? Panting, a sharp pain in his side, Harry didn't slow down until he reached the stone slide. He would have to leave the cloak where it was. It was too much of a giveaway in case Malfoy had tipped off a teacher. He hid it in a shadowy corner, then started to climb, fast as he could, his sweaty hands slipping on the sides of the chute. He reached the inside of the witch's hump, tapped it with his wand, stuck his head through, and hoisted himself out. The hump closed, and just as Harry jumped out from behind the statue, he heard quick footsteps approaching. It was Snape. He approached Harry at a swift walk, his black robes swishing, then stopped in front of him. So, he said, there was a look of suppressed triumph about him. Harry tried to look innocent, all too aware of his sweaty face and his muddy hands, which he quickly hid in his pockets. Come with me, Potter, said Snape. Harry followed him downstairs, trying to wipe his hands clean on the inside of his robes without Snape noticing. They walked down the stairs to the dungeons and then into Snape's office. Harry always seemed to be in trouble when he was in Snape's office. Snape had acquired a few more slimy, horrible things in jars since last time, all standing on shelves behind his desk, glinting in the firelight and adding to the threatening atmosphere. Sit, said Snape. Harry sat. Snape, however, remained standing. Mr. Malfoy has just been to see me with a strange story, Potter, said Snape. Harry didn't say anything. He tells me that he was up by the shrieking shack when he ran into Weasley, apparently alone. Still, Harry didn't speak. Mr. Malfoy states that he was standing talking to Weasley when your ghostly voice interrupted the conversation. How do you think that could have happened? Harry tried to look mildly surprised. I don't know, Professor. Snape's eyes were boring into Harry's. It was exactly like trying to stare down a hippogriff. Harry tried hard not to blink. Mr. Malfoy, naturally, reported this extraordinary apparition to me out of concern for your safety. There was a long silence. Maybe he'd better go to Madame Pomfrey, said Harry. If he's hearing things like, what would your voice have been doing in Hogsmeade, Potter? Said Snape softly. Your voice is not allowed in Hogsmeade. No part of your body has permission to be in Hogsmeade. I know that, said Harry, striving to keep his face free of guilt or fear. It sounds like Malfoy's having Malfoy is not having hallucinations, snarled Snape, and he bent down, a hand on each arm of Harry's chair, so that their faces were a foot apart. If your voice was in Hogsmeade, so was the rest of you. "'E been up in Gryffindor Tower," said Harry. "Like you told, can anyone confirm that?" Harry didn't say anything. Snape's thin mouth curled into a horrible smile. "So," he said, straightening up again. "Everyone from the Minister of Magic downward has been trying to keep famous Harry Potter safe from Sirius Black. But famous Harry Potter is a law unto himself. Let the ordinary people worry about his safety. Famous Harry Potter goes where he wants to, with no thought for the consequences." Harry stayed silent. Snape was trying to provoke him into telling the truth. He wasn't going to do it. Snape had no proof, yet. "What exactly is your word worth, Potter? Do not seek out Black, I said. Do not travel alone." "I didn't do either," Harry said, jerking his chin up. "I thought we were beyond playing word games, Mr. Potter. I said I wouldn't seek him out if he comes to me. If you are going to put yourself as bait for a trap, I expect you to have the sense to provide yourself with more backup than Ronald Weasley. Did you even bring Granger?" "I'm not telling you anything that get me expelled," Harry said severely. "You still want me packed up and living with the Dursleys, don't you? You have survived them for nearly 14 years. 3 more and you will be of age and alive. It doesn't matter to you that I hate them. I am not your guardian. If I have taken on the quixotic task of trying to keep your heart beating, it does not mean—" Snape trailed off, unusually incoherent. "It would not be appropriate, Mr. Potter. That is the place of your father, and he and I were not. Suffice to say that it would probably make both your parents unhappy were you to look to me for happiness." Harry wrestled with this. His parents' ghosts against his happiness, against the Dursleys, against survival. "Do you think it would have been better if they'd let Voldemort kill me?" he asked abruptly. "If they hadn't protected me, they'd be alive." The silence went on for a long time. "We will respect your mother's decision in the matter. We will respect your mother's decision in the matter." Harry took a shaky breath, aware suddenly he'd been holding his breath. "Your mother," he thought, adding it to a mental list of questions. Battle-light glinted feverish in Snape's eyes, and Harry knew somehow that this was another of those moments that could so easy tip over into violence. "Turn out your pockets, Potter," he spat suddenly. Harry didn't move. There was a pounding in his ears. "Turn out your pockets, or we go straight to the headmaster. Pull them out, Potter." Cold with dread, Harry slowly pulled out the bag of Zonko's tricks and the Marauder's map. Snape picked up the Zonko's bag. "That's mine. Perhaps it will teach you something then, to lose it." Harry seethed silently. "And the other?" Harry was silent. "Issy, I suppose it's a small step up from lying to my face." Snape turned it over, his eyes on Harry. "Surely you don't need such a very old piece of parchment," he said. "Why don't I just throw this away?" His hand moved toward the fire. "No," Harry said quickly. "So," said Snape, his long nostrils quivering. "Is this another treasured gift from Mr. Weasley? Or is it something else? A letter, perhaps, written in invisible ink, or instructions to get into Hogsmeade without passing the Dementors?" Harry blinked. Snape's eyes gleamed. Let me see," he muttered, taking out his wand and smoothing the map out on his desk. "Reveal your secret," he said, touching the wand to the parchment. Nothing happened. Harry clenched his hands to stop them from shaking. "Show yourself," Snape said, tapping the map sharply. It stayed blank. Harry was taking deep, calming breaths. "Professor Severus Snape, master of this school, commands you to yield the information you conceal," Snape said, hitting the map with his wand. As though an invisible hand were writing upon it, words appeared on the smooth surface of the map. "Moony presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business." Snape froze. Harry stared, dumbstruck, at the message. But the map didn't stop there. More writing was appearing beneath the first. "Mr. Prongs agrees with Mr. Moony and would like to add that Professor Snape is an ugly git. It would have been very funny if the situation hadn't been so serious. And there was more, Mr. Padfoot would like to register his astonishment that an idiot like that ever became a professor." Harry closed his eyes in horror. When he'd opened them, the map had had its last word, Mr. Wormtail bids Professor Snape good day and advises him to wash his hair, the slime ball. Harry waited for the blow to fall. "So," said Snape softly. "We'll see about this." He strode across to his fire, seized a fistful of glittering powder from a jar on the fireplace, and threw it into the flames. "Lupin," Snape called into the fire. "I want a word." Utterly bewildered, Harry stared at the fire. A large shape had appeared in it, revolving very fast. Seconds later, Professor Lupin was clambering out of the fireplace, brushing ash off his shabby robes. "You called Severus," said Lupin mildly. "I certainly did," said Snape, his face contorted with fury as he strode back to his desk. "I have just asked Potter to empty his pockets. He was carrying this." Snape pointed at the parchment, on which the words of Messrs. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs were still shining, An odd, closed expression appeared on Lupin's face. "Well," said Snape. Lupin continued to stare at the map. Harry had the impression that Lupin was doing some very quick thinking. "Well," said Snape again. "This parchment is plainly full of dark magic. This is supposed to be your area of expertise, Lupin. Where do you imagine Potter got such a thing?" Lupin looked up, and by the merest half-glance in Harry's direction, warned him not to interrupt. "Full of dark magic," he repeated mildly. "Do you really think so, Severus? It looks to me as though it is merely a piece of parchment that insults anybody who reads it. Childish, but surely not dangerous. I imagine Harry got it from a joke shop." "Indeed," said Snape. His jaw had gone rigid with anger. "You think a joke shop could supply him with such a thing? You don't think it more likely that he got it directly from the manufacturers?" Harry didn't understand what Snape was talking about. Nor, apparently, did Lupin. "You mean by Mr. Wormtail or one of these people?" he said. "Harry, do you know any of these men?" "No," said Harry quickly. "You see, Severus," said Lupin, turning back to Snape. "It looks like a Zonko product to me, right on cue." Ron came bursting into the office. He was completely out of breath and stopped just short of Snape's desk, clutching the stitch in his chest and trying to speak. "I gave Harry that stuff," he choked. "Bought it. In Zonko's. Ages ago." "Well," said Lupin, clapping his hands together and looking around cheerfully. "That seems to clear that up. Severus, I'll take this back, shall I?" He folded the map and tucked it inside his robes. "Harry, Ron, come with me. I need a word about my vampire essay. Excuse us, Severus." "Do you take me for a fool, Lupin?" Snape asked dangerously. "Potter and I were not finished with our discussion. He had a couple questions for me about werewolves." Harry twitched guiltily at the odd, closed look on Lupin's face. He really should have talked to Professor Lupin about that before now. "If Harry has questions about werewolves, I'll be happy to answer them for him," Lupin replied mildly. "But I can speak from personal experience. After all, his father did think it would be funny to trick me into almost being eaten by one in school. I can't quite remember. Did you find that funny, Lupin?" Ron looked incredibly awkward. Harry felt incredibly awkward. He knew he'd upset Snape, but watching the man take it out on Professor Lupin was awful. "Enough, Severus," Lupin said firmly. "We were schoolchildren. If you want to talk about our school days, I would be happy to at some other time." Snape's eyes glittered in his sallow face, and Harry thought very quickly. "I've been working on mixing calming draught and hot chocolate," he interrupted. "I thought it'd be a nice change from butterbeer or chocolate bars. For some reason, it makes all the house elves really manic." Ron made a throat-slitting gesture along the lines of, "Are you crazy? Why are you trying to attract his attention?" "Heating calming draught disturbs the essence and ferments it," Snape said very slowly. "In humans, it causes tremors and visual migraines. You've been testing recipes on the house elves, Potter." Harry grinned because that was normal teacherly anger, not cool murderous rage. He was getting better at this. "The headmaster will hear about your little escapade, Potter. Go, before I lose my temper." Lupin ushered Harry, and Ron hastily out of the room. Chapter 33. Draco Dislikes Losing. "How'd you get Snape to let you off?" Malfoy asked in a furious whisper during the next potions class. Tensions were running high with the Quidditch Cup on the line, and Ron was watching Malfoy narrowly. "How do you think?" Harry whispered back. "By lying. It's too bad he can't use potions on students. A bit of Veritaserum, and you'd be hung up by your heels where you belong, and I wouldn't have to bother beating you at Quidditch." "In your dreams. Why are you so hung up on cheating anyway?" "It's called being cunning, Potter. How would you like it if I bribed you with a big bowl of clotted cream to throw the match?" If Draco'd been in his cat form, his whiskers would have twitched. "I can get my own cream, thank you," Draco said haughtily, and went back to his potion. Harry snorted. "I've known for ages," Harry said to Professor Lupin during Dementor practice. "Hermione told me at Christmas. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but it's quite all right, Harry. I understand. Did Professor Snape say anything else? Not really. I don't understand why not. Sometimes it's best for the old to leave children to find their own way, without the burdens of the past. Harry thought that was a load of rubbish, but was too polite to say so. Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape had a tense conversation, and Harry ended up out of potions lessons for the duration of the lead-up to the cup match in Quidditch. Harry didn't complain, as it meant he had time for more sleep and more nightmares. Winning the cup was glorious. Neither Draco nor Snape could look at him for a week. They both pretended he didn't exist, and it was the most perfect, restful week had ever had. Topped off by a kitten dropping on his head as he walked between classes in a classic example of death from above, raking at his eyes with tiny claws. Harry wrestled it off him and ducked into an alcove, shoving his glasses up his nose and holding the struggling cat up and away from him. Would you stop? Someone'll hear. The kitten scratched him one more time, then ceased moving. Harry was very tempted to shake him, but set the tiny beast down on the stones and adjusted his glasses instead. Look, Malfoy, it was a good game, all right. You almost beat me. The kitten puffed up fury and growled at him. All right, it was a terrible game, but if you assume cheating is all right then, that was some good cheating. Harry sat down cross-legged on the floor so as not to loom. Professor Snape says the only redeeming quality of Quidditch is as war by other means. So you lost this battle. There's always next year, if you don't get in trouble for clawing my eyes out. A flicker of magic, and Draco was adjusting his robes and leaning against the wall, casual as if he hadn't been trying to maim Harry a few seconds ago. No need to be condescending, Potter. I wasn't trying to be condescending, Harry said, standing and tucking his hands into his pockets. You manage it without trying, believe me. I don't see what you're so angry about. You won on Buckbeak. No, my father won. I have not yet lost. What's that mean? It means I may call upon you to lend me that unfairly convenient invisibility cloak one of these days. Are you saying you'll help? I dislike losing. Good day, Potter. Tiny little evil animal. Huge, huge ego. Chapter 34. Draco Malfoy's Excellent Adventure. Being able to turn into a kitten may have made him the laughingstock of his dorm room and drawn far too much professorial attention, but it wastes excellent for sneaking. He was below the eye level of all the portraits, and he was far from the only cat in the castle. Not that he was in the castle right at the moment. The weather was good, the trees were beginning to leaf out, and being a cat made it much easier to avoid thinking about his father's latest letter. He didn't know what his father was thinking, reminding him that only the strong could expect to learn powerful magic. Draco pounced savagely on a rustle in the long grass, felt fur under his paws, and let instinct guide him as he bit down hard. Another vole. He sniffed it, then batted at it with a paw. Dead. Good, he thought. He wasn't weak. He was a predator. Draco sniffed it again, on the off chance it would come back to life and entertain him. The vole remained stubbornly dead. He batted at it with a paw, causing it to roll interestingly. It wasn't as if he was going toe at it. He had his standards, but he batted at it with the other paw, and the chase was on. It wasn't that Draco couldn't ignore the cat instincts if he wanted to. He could. His was a complete, perfect transformation. It's just that sometimes he didn't particularly want to be human. The cat didn't feel pressure the same way. It didn't have anything to live up to. Give it something to kill and a warm place to sleep, and it was happy. He was lying on his side, panting in the grass, cursing the long walk back up to the castle in this form. He was almost to the forbidden forest, though not under the shadow of the trees, when he saw a large orange kneazle moving purposefully away from the castle. Curious, Draco got to his feet, stretched, and stalked cautiously after it. It was a horribly large cat, at least 3 times his size, and having to switch shapes to defend himself was beneath his dignity. Better not to be seen. Draco topped a small rise and dropped flat to the ground on his belly. Because if that was Sirius Black talking to that cat, crouched in the shade of a dell behind one of the first trees of the forbidden forest. Could he catch him? Could Heb, the hero of the school for once, on the other hand, should catch him. After all, Sirius Black was supposed to have been one of the key supporters of the Dark Lord, trusted to infiltrate the inner circle of the other side, a closely held secret only revealed upon the Dark Lord's death. That wasn't the sort of person you crossed. He could get an order of Merlin, maybe a firebolt from his father, and facing down an adult wizard would definitely make his father change his mind about worrying about Draco going soft in Dumbledore's pernicious influence. On the other hand, rushing in to get himself killed was a Gryffindor thing to do. Jaws closed around the nape of his neck, picking him up like a kitten and carrying him towards Sirius Black. Draco squirmed in panic and rage, but mostly panic. "You again," Black said. Draco paused. "Again." "You can understand me?" Black asked. Draco lashed his tail and squirmed. The huge orange beast put him down on the grass, and Draco shook himself. His fur was going every which way. It was awful. "Cats are getting smarter all the time," Black said, sounding a little lost. "Good. Someone other than Draco should be feeling confused right now. Perhaps he should just wander off while Black was thinking." Crookshanks hissed warningly. Draco flattened his ears at the beast, keeping a wary eye on it. "But Crookshanks doesn't trust you. Sorry, cat, but I can't take the chance." That was a knife. No, thank you." With a rush of the still unfamiliar magic, Draco was human again, stepping backwards and drawing his wand in one motion, leveling it between Black's eyes. "I'll thank you not to move, cousin." "That hair, Malfoy, Narcissa's boy." Draco agreed, taking another wary step back, having 1 second to feel something furry behind his ankles before he was falling backwards. It wasn't gentlemanly to swear. Draco thought the worst thing he could, and then Black was wrestling with him, and Black had his wand. Wonderful. Black pointed it at him and barked a word. Nothing happened. He shook it briskly, and absolutely nothing happened. "What's your wand, core boy?" Draco looked up his wand at Black and decided that he and Black were going to be friends. Cousins should be friends. "Unicorn." "Ah, never was any good with unicorn. Strange wand for a Malfoy." "May I have it back, please? After all, I can't be any help without a wand." "You help?" "Well, certainly. We're blood, aren't we?" "You can get up." "Wonderful." Draco got up and brushed the grass stains off his robes. "Ah, peasant problems." "I need a rat." "No, I need Ronald Weasley's rat." "Ronald Weasley's rat is dead. There was a great deal of fuss about it 2 months ago. Killed by this cat here, I believe." "He faked it." "The rat faked it," Draco said, and cut off his snide remark at Black's dark look. "Of course, cousin. As you may imagine, I am aptly suited to the task of locating your missing rodent. I would be happy to assist you if you do something for me." Draco straightened his tie and hid his fear behind a blank mask. "I need you to steal a hippogriff." Chapter 35. Everyone Lies. It was, of course, much more complicated than that, but having an ulterior motive did wonders for Black believing that he'd cooperate with a wanted murderer. Draco couldn't help but think back to his father's explanation 2 summers ago. The trick is to have more than one ulterior motive. Black's explanation of what he wanted with the rat was something else, too. It warmed Draco's heart to imagine Weasley's expression when he heard that he'd been sleeping with a Death Eater. Why Pettigrew didn't slaughter them all in their beds, though, eluded him, obviously a coward, and thus not useful. Draco squared his shoulders and took a breath. He'd given Black 15 minutes to move from the spot where Draco had seen him, if the man had any sense at all. All right, let's make this good. After a moment's thought, he ripped his sleeve sharply, as if it had been torn during a struggle. Expression horrified and scared, eyes wide, out of breath as if he'd been running, the grass-stained robes and mussed hair probably added something to the effect. He loosened his tie a little. He wouldn't have been thinking to straighten it if he were an innocent victim. He pounded frantically on the door to Snape's office. "Professor Snape, sir, I've just seen Sirius Black by the forest. Dutifully report intruders to his head of house. Check. Look like he survived a fight with a mass murderer. Check." "Where?" his professor asked, standing abruptly, eyes alight. "Near the edge of the forest. I was out practicing my transformation. I ran all the way back. Sir, he's mad. He spent ages giving me a silly speech about how he was wronged and never served the Dark Lord and had to find a rat animagus called Peter Pettigrew." "How long ago was this?" "I ran all the way here, sir," Draco promised, and swayed artistically. To his delight, his head of house looked as if he wanted to curse. "Do you need the hospital wing?" "No, sir, I'm fine. Really I am. I got my wand back," he added, because that last part made the struggle sound nice and fierce, and not as if he'd been manhandled by a cat. "Come in and sit down," his professor said gently. "I'll get you a calming draft and you can tell me about it. Black will have bolted, but I'll send a message to the guards." "Yes, sir," Draco said. The calming draft was very nice, though he only pretended to drink most of it. He didn't want to lose control of his tongue. This was delightfully delicate work. Professor Snape stepped out, and Draco was left alone to think through his story. There was no reason to hide anything from Professor Snape, so Draco wouldn't. He could tell the whole story, leaving aside the timing, circumstances, most of what Draco himself had said, and Draco's plans for Black. The whole story, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. "Come, Draco," Professor Snape said from the doorway. "There's no reason for you to repeat yourself more than once, so we'll see Professor Dumbledore together. He's not going to take points, is he? I think I should earn some for being heroic myself." Professor Snape smiled at him. "I wouldn't get your hopes up about that myself. His favoritism towards his lions is too strong to expect much, but we must do our duty to ensure Black is captured." "I was thinking, Professor, I can tell my father about this myself, can't I? He doesn't need to be called. I wasn't injured, just startled." "How did you manage that feat?" Draco smiled. "I talked very quickly indeed, sir. I think you would have been proud." "I'm pleased you are safe. Perhaps next time leave the wild adventuring to the Gryffindors. We won't miss a few of them if they manage to meet with accidents." Draco laughed. "I'm not eager to meet him again, sir. It's just that ever since I hurt my arm earlier this year, my father's been concerned for my welfare. I don't want to worry him." "Understandably. It was a dreadful injury," Professor Snape said dryly. "Truly awful," Draco admitted cheerfully. "And the disruptive effect on Rubeus Hagrid's class was a completely unforeseen side effect." "I don't want to speak ill of a teacher, sir," Draco said in his most earnest tone, the one that always got a smile, and true to form there it was. Heck knew what he meant, and Professor Snape knew what he meant, but neither of them said it. It was wonderful. Professor Snape really was the most wonderful teacher. Draco's steps slowed as they reached the headmaster's office. "Mr. Malfoy, the headmaster will not bite. He gave me quite the lecture on being a responsabilimagus," Draco said quietly, eyeing the headmaster's door. "As if I was a common criminal who done it in order to steal pocket watches. Why did you attempt the spell? I'd thought your interest in potions genuine." "I'm sorry, sir. I am interested in potions. You'll think it juvenile, I'm sure. Allowances can be made. Please tell me." "Potter dared me to, sir, in first year." "That is a very dangerous dare to make. You could have died or been lost." You know, I don't have a good thing to say about him, but it was ignorance, not malice, in that case. He doesn't know any better. Withy thought they should let muggles raise someone who was of good wizard's blood. He could have been great, sir. Indeed. Are you composed? I do not think that is a thought you should share with the headmaster. Yes, sir. I'm ready now. Chapter 36. Baby's First Xanato's Gambit. Professor Snape's explanation of Draco's narrow escape from Black's clutches made it sound even worse than Draco had been meaning to make it sound. Draco sat stiff-backed and proud under the headmaster's eye, mind clear except for what had been running through his head when faced with Black threatening him with his own wand. I need to say whatever I have to say to get out of this, Draco explained. When prompted, almost everything Black had said in his ramble about Pettigrew and murdering Pettigrew and everything being his fault. The headmaster's face grew grave, especially at the description of the rat, and the photograph Draco had been shown in the Daily Prophet of the rat and the Weasleys in Egypt. This has gone on long enough, was Professor Snape's contribution. Surely you must see now that they were all involved in one way or another. Let me question him. I think I will do that, Severus. You may witness if you like. That would be appreciated, headmaster, Snape said stiffly. Is there anything else you want to tell me, Draco? The headmaster said, twinkling at him. It reminded Draco of a snitch, which reminded him of the feel of pouncing on mice with his paws and bearing down. Snap of teeth, breaking bone. Draco shook his head, more because he could tell he was nervous when he started fantasizing about going hunting than because he remembered the question. Shall we call it 25 points from Slytherin for putting yourself in unnecessary danger and reckless use of animagus transformation, and 50 points to Slytherin for quick thinking in a dangerous situation? Dumbledore thought he was very clever. Draco bowed shortly and made himself scarce. Fawkes, if you would fetch Remus for me, he heard the headmaster saying. They were probably going to institute a search. Well, Draco would do his own searching later. He'd more or less given his word to try to locate Pettigrew, and while he didn't feel any particular attachment to promises made to a disaster like Black, the plausible deniability offered him Tinto keep his word appealed to him. After all, then it wouldn't be his fault if he failed. Pettigrew was supposedly an adult wizard, after all. Draco had time to think over dinner and pumpkin juice. If he was, for once, unusually quiet, none of his classmates commented, which was just as he liked it. Most of the staff were missing from the head table, apparently scrambled to deal with the new problem of another dark wizard running around Hogwarts unchecked. It was good to have incompetent enemies, but really, why they hadn't fired Dumbledore before now. Black wanted Pettigrew and would rescue Buckbeak in return. Professor Snape wanted Black, and Pettigrew was an afterthought. Professor Dumbledore wanted Black and Pettigrew, and wanted Draco to stay out of it. Pettigrew, presumably, wanted to avoid everyone on the aforementioned list, because they wanted to throw him to the Dementors, but might possibly have a soft spot for Ronald Weasley. Ronald Weasley probably wanted his rat back, come to think of it. Harry Potter wanted Black dead, but Harry was, as usual, ignorant. Draco wanted the Hippogriff rescued, preferably in a way he could blame on Hermione Granger or Harry Potter. Other than that, he wanted this all sorted out before exams, and in a way that no one felt the need to inform his father he was mucking around with disgraced Death Eaters and mass murderers. He also wanted the Dementors out of his school already. So, the fastest solution to this problem was to find Pettigrew and fight him. No, that was stupid. Warn him to get out of the school because everyone was on to him. Tell him he had to get out of the country, give him a little pocket money for travel, directions to the nearest Muggle train station. Let Black know what direction he'd gone so they could have their big confrontation someplace, and Draco could sit his exams in peace. Kill Pettigrew if the opportunity came up, probably. It's not as if anyone would miss him, and there were some curses Draco had been curious about trying that couldn't be solved by the hospital wing. It was self-defense, sir. Draco rehearsed in his head and smiled. Now, let's see. What could he add to this situation to attain maximum chaos? The headmaster was the most tricky part of this whole plan, but there was only one of him. Draco's gaze slid around the Great Hall and settled firmly on Ronald Weasley and Harry Potter. Yes, that would be perfect.